Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us this evening. We're here for a virtual artist talk with the two artists currently on display at Westland Gallery right now. We have Sherry Czekus and Tracy Bultje. And both artists are new to Westland Gallery, so I'm also new to pronouncing your last names, and I appreciate you giving me the phonetics ahead of time here. Welcome. We're so happy to have you both exhibiting with us this year.
Thank you very much, Danielle. I want to thank you for all the help that you've given me in bringing the show to completion. And I also want to thank Al and Karen for their help, and also Caitlin, who did an interview with me on the phone. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, Caitlin. So Al and Karen are the owners of Westland Gallery here. And Caitlin is our intern from Western University, which is also here in London. And she's been a big help to us in getting ready for this show, for sure. I actually, on the topic of Western University, because I want to start this chat with a little bit of a background on the education that both of you have. So if we want to start with Sherry, you did your BA at the University of Waterloo, which I actually went to Waterloo for my BA as well, so I was interested to read that. And then you went on to do an MFA at Western here in London.
Yes, I did. Yeah.
What was your experience with post-secondary art education?
Oh, wow. I think I just felt really lucky to be able to do it because I was a little bit older when I decided to go back to school and kind of make this decision and kind of commit to studying art. And then doing my MFA at Western, it was hard. I won't lie about that. It was definitely hard, but oh my gosh, it was so good. And I met so many great people and great artists and, wonderful professors. And yeah, I loved it. And I loved London because I lived there, through the week for 2 years while I was there with someone else who was also doing their MFA. And it was so fun. Like, you don't often get that opportunity, to kind of move out of the house and leave your family behind.
Try out a new city.
Yeah, try out a new city. And so London, by the time, my MFA was over, London really was feeling a lot like home.
Well, I'm glad you were able to have a show here with us this year.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that opportunity.
So did you grow up in Waterloo then and before, when you were a child and teenager?
No, I actually grew up in Chatham.
Yay!
I know, Chatham. So I grew up in Chatham. I went to elementary school and some of my high school was in Chatham. And then my family moved to essentially Waterloo. And I finished up high school here. And yeah, and so I have like really great memories of Chatham. Still have a lot of family that live in Chatham too. And yeah, so I felt like it was, with, Westland Gallery has really strong connections to Chatham, and then Tracy being from Chatham, I just kind of felt like this show came full circle.
Yeah, yeah, it did. We were happy to hear of the Chatham connection as well. Karen, that's the owner here, is from Chatham, and Tracy, you still, you live in Chatham now.
Yes, right? I have been born and raised in Chatham. I have lived here my entire life.
Wow, that's fantastic. And your art education is a self-taught education in many ways, a different approach than Sherry took. Yes. But you did have some really influential teachers during high school, correct?
I had one influential teacher in high school, and we were at a very small high school, and the school brought him in, and he was an artist. He was a painter. So they brought him in to teach art, and he taught us painting the whole semester. So that's the only thing I learned in high school was painting with my teacher, Ray Coney. And he was very influential to me. Yes, he was. In fact, when he passed, I received a call from his wife, and she said, you found a very special spot in Ray's heart, and he wanted to leave his brushes and paints for you. So she said, I will give them to you if you promise me that you will continue painting. And I said, I promise I'll continue painting. So here I am, so many years later, still painting, yes.
I absolutely love that story. That's fantastic. And it's true, you know, art teachers can have such a profound impact on young artists. Some of the artists that we work with are teachers themselves, and it's just such a important role in, you know, fostering creativity for young people. You also wrote to us that you would spend some of your pocket money on art books and how-to books.
Yeah. This is when I was very young, so maybe 13 or 14 years old, and doing a little bit of babysitting. I received 50 cents an hour if it was a good paying job, maybe 45 cents an hour. And I would save that money and I would buy the how-to books for about $1.50. And I still have them. I still have them in my studio.
That's amazing.
Yes.
Sherry, were you a creative kid as well?
I loved any kind of drawing material, scissors, colored paper, that kind of thing. But I have a memory when I was quite young, before I was even in elementary school, where my mom had come into contact with my great grandmother's set of oil paints and her set of chalk pastels. And she had passed away probably, you know, maybe 5 years before that. And so like there were these chalk pastels that were just so saturated with color, but you know, as soon as you would draw with them, they would just kind of crumble to nothing. So there was this kind of preciousness about them. And so when you use them, you had to be, you know, so careful. So there was kind of, you know, that thing about, you know, kind of understanding like a really important piece of, you know, chalk to make art with. Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. Let's talk a little bit about your technique. How did you come to develop your individual style of painting? It kind of involves almost like a color blocking style of painting.
Are you talking to me?
Yes, to you, Sherry, sorry.
I never thought I was going to be this hard edge painter. It's like surprises me all the time. And I try to soften the edges, but lots of times I just go back over and, you know, kind of make this hard kind of edge. I think I kind of look at them as color puzzles. And so it wasn't really so much about thinking about the blocking of color as so much as kind of putting all of those forms together to kind of, you know, have this combination of color together.
Oh,
Is that your pup? That's okay.
I'll just close my door.
There's always, I mean, we've all gotten so used to doing these virtual events this year, and there's often a dog playing a role, or a kid. So it's interesting you describing your technique, Sherry, kind of as a puzzle with these pieces that slot together, because Tracy, when you describe your technique, it's very process oriented, and you kind of have this real set of steps and procedures kind of that you go through. Can you tell us about that? Or plan
Yes,
that you go through?
I think that when I decided that I was going to be a painter, I had to give it some thought, and how would my painting reflect my life or reflect who I am? And I knew that I couldn't be a spontaneous, messy painter. That just wouldn't suit my heart. So I actually just thought, okay, you have to take it methodically and logically, like you do everything else in life. And that's how I came to painting, I think, in a very orderly fashion. I actually I photograph first, and then I graph my photograph and I transpose that onto the canvas. And I draw it out very carefully. I write little symbols on my canvas to tell me what areas are dark, or what are the medium areas, or what are the highlight areas. And then I put my canvas flat on a table, and I do watery wet washes, And much like Sherry, it is hard edge. It is color against color, nothing mixing over top of each other. And then my patterns are set. From there, I put the canvas up on the easel, which you see behind me here. And then I start painting, but really staying within those color blocks.
Yeah, it's interesting. I heard from Karen you describing that process to her, and that really fascinated me, because I do think the ways in which artists work are so unique and often do tie in a bit to your personality, or to kind of, you know, your style, your flair in the rest of your life, right? If you're a lover of detail or a lover of spontaneity, or it reflects in the work for sure. So I also want to talk a little bit about kind of each of your creative process, and this kind of ties into what I was just saying, but the ways in which, you know, your personality or your daily habits, your daily practices tie into your studio work. I really resonated, Sherry, with something that you wrote in your interview with our intern, Caitlin, which was about kind of your daily routine in the studio involving these 3 steps. And I was really attracted to that kind of a loose structure. I think especially during these unusual times in COVID, I think it could be helpful to other artists who are looking for a bit of a routine, because we're so, you know, everything's so loose right now. A little bit of a routine, but that still leaves lots of room to play. So could you tell us about your routine?
Sure. The way I like to, I kind of think about things in terms of prepping, painting, and then planning. So I prep my surfaces because I stretch my own canvas, and you know, layer the gesso on and prep those surfaces, because I like to kind of have a feel, and I know the feel before I can actually start painting on them. And then I have to paint for, you know, a certain amount of time for the day. So every day I'm painting when I'm there. And sometimes I'm working on several paintings at once, and sometimes I'm just really focusing on one painting. And then I always give myself time to plan, because I find it's really difficult to start thinking about next steps. And, you know, you can kind of get locked into making the same kind of work all the time. So I like the idea of, you know, taking a little bit of time to either, you know, read an article, jot down some notes, listen to a podcast. And sometimes, you know, you can multitask, or you can be planning and, you know, painting or prepping at the same time. But I like to kind of structure my day into those certain those 3 steps, and then it kind of keeps my momentum going in the studio.
That's great. And you work in a separate studio. It's not in your home, correct?
No, it's not. It's downtown Kitchener. It's called Globe Studios, and I work with, it's just like done a big expansion. So I think I probably work with like 30 or 40 different artists in their studios now too. So yeah, it's really changing. And so we're meeting with new people and seeing lots of new work, and yeah.
That's interesting. What do you enjoy about stretching your own canvases? Because not everybody does that anymore.
No, I know it's hard. So I have my stretchers made by some lovely people in Toronto, day and night. And then I just order canvas by the roll. And I kind of like, there's like this certain kind of tension. I like to feel the tension.
Yeah.
There's like a certain kind of gesso and a certain amount of tooth. And I don't know, I get like, I don't know. You think about, you know, animals kind of making their little bed, you know, before they can finally lay down. I'm kind of like that with my with my canvases before I start painting.
Good. I heard a sound of agreement from you, Tracy. Are you particular on your canvases as well?
For my smaller canvases, I purchase them, but once they get to a certain size, I like to stretch them myself. My husband George is a cabinet maker, so I just give him the size, and by the end of the day, he'll come home with the frame, and then I also buy canvas in a roll and stretch it, and I can identify with Sherry too, because I run my fingers over the surface just to feel the tension across the surface, and you can tell if a part is a little loose or a little tight. And I do enjoy that process as well. Mhm.
Yeah, there's most artists have love for their materials as well as
Yes.
for the process, right? And there's a very tactile quality about the materials that you love to work with. Yeah.
My studio is in my home, which is a little different than Sherry, but I am very disciplined. You know, I said I like order. I'm very disciplined. I try to be in my studio at 10 o'clock every morning, and I stay till about 4. Yeah, and it suits me well. And others have come to know that that's my studio time. It might be that people come and visit during my studio time, but I do always take time for that, because my motto in life is that relationships are the most important thing in life. So if somebody stops by, I'll always have a little sit down chat. I have a couple of chairs in my studio. We'll have a cup of tea together. It always seems to work out.
That's beautiful. We definitely have come to appreciate those little moments of connection so much this year as well. What's your routine then for getting into the studio and getting into a creative mindset?
Well, I actually probably start early on in the day. I'm a very spiritual person. I do a little bit of reading in the morning. As soon as I wake up, they actually help me. My reading, I read scripture, I read the Bible. It helps me form my thoughts and put my heart in the right place for the day. And from there, I do what needs to be done in the house. And when it's time for me to go into the studio, those thoughts are on my mind. I often, I have a light board in my studio. I often write words on my light board to give me inspiration based on my reading or based on my thoughts. Right now, my light board says, "You can breathe again." I put those words up after I delivered my work to the gallery. It's kind of an offshoot off the painting, breathe in, breathe out. Just, giving myself time and rest, and not pushing myself in the studio, but just enjoying my time in the studio for now. I do also give time for thinking time. I call it thinking time in the studio. I paint, I sit back, I look, I think, I plan, I paint again. Sometimes I will look at books to receive inspiration. Sometimes I write in my journal. If I run stuck, I try to ground myself again before I go back to painting. And of course, it's not all painting time in the studio, but I give myself time to think, to plan, to paint, to appreciate other people's art as well.
Lovely. I think that balance is what makes for a really sustainable art practice. And obviously it's going to go through a little bit of waves, like you mentioned, kind of the change and pressure when you're working towards a show. But I think those kind of habits can be fulfilling. Sherry, what's your experience working towards a show or trying to build a collection of paintings? Do you enjoy it?
I do enjoy it, and it is kind of nice to have a deadline, because nothing gets the work done like a deadline. And yeah, I do, and I like to kind of start putting works together a little bit in my head, but for the most part, I think I'm pretty spontaneous when it comes to what lands on the canvas. I don't usually have a really big plan, but I do enjoy kind of linking pieces of work so that they're kind of showing as a body without looking necessarily like too linked, if that makes sense. So they're a little bit different from each other. So that's probably the part I enjoy the most, is kind of seeing how all of these different works are coming together for a show that you can kind of hang. And also too, Tracy, I have to admit, like I was so curious the whole time. I wonder what Tracy's doing. I wonder what Tracy's making. And I really resisted temptation to contact you to say, can you send me a couple of images? But I thought, no, I really have to kind of stick to my, to what I'm doing. And, we did kind of come up with that idea, a matter of color. So, color was kind of the theme for the show. And I thought we probably couldn't go wrong if we were kind of.
No, you're right.
But I did think about contacting you a couple of times.
I enjoy the process of connecting artists who've never, had you ever met before?
No, and I actually enjoyed our conversation before everybody else came on. We were talking about color because obviously it's very important to both of us, but I really appreciate how Sherry takes color, and it's as if one color leads to another, and she repeats her color, but in slight variations, and it's like you can take a pathway across her beautiful compositions, and just, it's like the color is singing to each other. It's just beautiful.
That's very insightful, Tracy. I'm looking at one of Sherry's pieces right now, and I can absolutely see that there's, a thread of these kind of common color themes, but there's these beautiful slight variations amongst the tones. So we do, just for everyone listening, when we pair up artists, especially artists who know each other or who don't, I love to set them the task of coming up with a title for the show, for myself, for administrative reasons as well, but also because I love the opportunity for the artists to connect with each other and kind of find some common ground. And for you two, it was color. And I'm curious, how critically, this is a question for both of you, do you think about color theory? Is it a fairly intuitive process for you, or is it a bit more, say, scientific?
Who would you like to?
Do you want to go first, Tracy?
I'm breaking up. Me?
Sure, yes.
Okay, sorry, I'm getting a little disconnected here. I would say for me, it's both. Before I start a painting, I give a lot of thought to color theory, and I sometimes even write notes to myself about the color and what needs to happen with color. And then as I'm painting, it becomes more intuitive, and it almost becomes a matter of like how what color feels against another color. Yeah, so I would say it's a good balance of both. And then when I run stuck, then I have to go back to the logical part and think about color theory. But I would say as I'm painting, it becomes intuitive.
Great answer, thank you. Sherry, how about for you?
Yeah, color is really important consideration. Once I kind of get all those figures kind of mapped out on the canvas, then I kind of forget that they're people, and it just becomes a big color puzzle. I really think about theory. Oftentimes I'll start painting, say, with navy blue, and those colors will kind of lead down a certain color path into the painting. And if I change up sometimes my starting point, like maybe I'll start painting with like a blushy peach color, and that kind of lands the painting in a whole different place. And I really kind of enjoy sort of sorting that out. Sometimes I actually paint myself into a pretty terrible corner to kind of sit back and think about it, but it really is an intuitive process. But the one thing that I really enjoy about color is something I learned when I was in art school, something called retinal vibration. When you put two colors together, how they're, kind of bouncing off of each other and playing off of each other. And so you can kind of create this, and I hate to use this cliche-ish term, but this space on the canvas. But it is important when you're painting quite flat, but you're trying to create some kind of depth without really creating depth. You can definitely do that with colors that you're putting together.
Fascinating. I mean, there's so much, from a technical standpoint that you can know about color theory, but then there's also that the intuition of the artist, right? And their own unique way of handling color, for sure. I'm curious, Sherry, because your paint, Tracy, your paint is quite opaque, but Sherry, yours has a little bit more translucency to it. Are you able to make corrections if a color isn't working?
Oh, definitely. Yes, I can definitely make corrections, and there's all kinds of corrections there that maybe aren't really apparent in a sense of, you know, glazing, because, you know, that's a really nice technique that you can do with oil. And sometimes I like to do glazing over top of really dry paint, and sometimes I like to do glazing over paint that's not quite dry, and so you get a little bit of blending as well. But yes, definitely there are corrections.
Hidden from my eye. I'd like to make an invitation to those who are listening tonight. If you'd like to ask a question of Sherry or Tracy, just write it in the chat box. That it's either on the right-hand side of your screen, or if you don't see it, there should be a chat icon along the bottom. We'd love to answer your questions, so feel free to put one there, and we will get to those at the end of the talk. Let's talk a little bit about subject matter. So Tracy, your paintings are the forest. And I was interested today to see a picture that you posted on Instagram, which was you in the forest, kind of as your end of day grounding practice. Is that something that you do a lot?
Oh yes, I would say at least 3 times a day. I actually leave my studio. Of course, my studio's at home, and we live in the country, and we live on the river. So I leave my studio and I walk down to the river at least twice a day. Of course, my dog Morris compels me to do that. So yeah, I enjoy it. It gives me a little bit of fresh air, and it kind of clears my mind. And sometimes you get it's very tiring to be in one room and standing for a long period of time. It feels good to get out and walk and just enjoy the colors, the peace, the air. It's really quite wonderful.
That's nice. And so most of these paintings, are they the forest near your home?
Yes, most of them from this series is right around, you know, just walking distance from the back of our home, and also from Rondeau Provincial Park, which is about a 45-minute drive, well, for me to get to the trail anyway. But that's the 2 areas that I worked on.
Very nice. Have you ever done series of different locations in Ontario? Do you go, or do you like to stick kind of close to home?
I like to stick close to home. It's important to me because, I mean, there's all kinds of artists in our beautiful country that live all over the country, and I think it's very meaningful for artists to paint the locations where they're living. I really do like painting southwestern Ontario. Our vegetation is very flat. It's different from most places in Ontario. I think it's unique. We have a lot of marshland, a lot of farmland, a lot of rough tree lines in between the fields, lots of little brooks, and we have rivers and lakes close by. There's plenty for me to paint close to home.
Wonderful. Never lacking for inspiration.
No.
And how about for you, Sherry? You would have faced kind of an interesting challenge this year because you paint a lot of crowds, and we're kind of mandated not to be in crowds right now.
Exactly. Yeah. So my crowds, I live in Waterloo, and so there's not a lot of crowds here either. You know, you can find a half a dozen people gathering on a street corner, but it's not really a kind of like a denser kind of social situation. So my paintings are from images that I take when I'm traveling. And I'm just thinking the one that's right behind you, those people are in Sydney, Australia. And I'm just thinking of all the paintings that you have. So they're from Sydney, there's some from Dublin, Toronto, New York City. There, Adrift in the Crowd is a New York City scene
Yeah.
from a few years ago. So it's really kind of caused me to go back into the photos that I already have and, kind of mine them for a little bit more information and, maybe think about different color palettes and a different, I don't know, compositions and that sort of thing. But like Tracy, so Tracy and I, we kind of, have a bit of a similar process in terms of, how we clear our head. Tracy likes to, go for a walk in the country. I'm downtown Kitchener. So what I do is I go through Victoria Park. So I'm going to the same thing. I'm going where there's trees and there's water, but there's also a lot of people. So I get pretty energized by, taking a little half-hour stroll around the park too, and, back to the studio and kind of a fresher perspective. But it's definitely, there's no new images this year, that's for sure.
Revisiting old muses.
Okay.
I have to ask, do you love being in a crowd? Because it's kind of an experience that people either really enjoy or really don't.
I love it. I love big cities. I love lots of people. I like it when it's kind of noisy. Yeah, I really love that experience. And I noticed that there wasn't really a lot of art that was, kind of expressing, that kind of environment. And I think that, when we're all together in a crowd, I think that there's, a lot of things that we learn about each other without really kind of realizing these kind of casual, brushes with different people and, how that influences us on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'm curious to talk about scale of your work. For the most part, both of you seem to like to paint really big, or fairly big, at least. But there are a couple small little 12 by 12 pieces in this show. So I'm curious, how you feel about painting different sizes and how you pick when a piece is suited to a smaller study or a bigger exploration. Tracy, do you want to start?
Sure. For big paintings, small paintings continue to be a challenge for me. I don't know why, but my preference is very large. Like the 60 by 60 would be really the smallest that I like to go. I would like to go even bigger than that. And I will be in the next few months, I will be going bigger than that, maybe 60 by 70. We try to actually find the maximum size that will fit in the back of my truck. So that would be 60 by 70. The small ones for me were hard work. What I do with the small ones is, well, I should talk about my process and then you'll understand the small ones better. When I mix paint, I mix them in jars like this. And when I work like Sherry, I work through one color at a time. It's very methodical. But at the end of the painting, I would have like little bits of paint left in my jar. And I often let my grandchildren use it up and paint on some lovely canvas that they can take home to use my leftover bits. But once in a while, I'll use my leftover bits and do a bit of an abstract. And a lot of these abstracts I named, it's a matter of color. For me, that's exactly what it is. It's a matter of color. I'm using up my color and I'm challenging myself to use this color in a different way that will result in something that is pleasant to look at. And when I'm used to painting orderly and methodically, painting a little more expressively is actually a challenge for me.
Nice. So they're kind of a stretch and an exploration, those smaller canvases for you.
Yeah. But I think they're delightful, those little ones.
They are
delightful. And often when I do a show, I do put some small ones in from my leftover paint bits, and often they're sold out on a night of my show.
Yeah, they're just very happy little shot of color and flavor. Yes, I think. Yeah.
And I don't.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
color straight out of the tube. Every color I use is something that I have mixed myself.
Amazing. That goes back into the love of color that you both have, I think. Sherry, how about for you in terms of scale?
I'm usually working at a large scale because I like to kind of work with figures that are kind of close to life size, or at least they kind of feel life size, even if you're standing at a distance.
Mm-hmm.
So the small ones that you have, the little 12 by 12s, I've actually taken pieces of clothing and I've stretched those as my canvas. And so it's actually, it feels like a real, like authentic part of the crowd. And then I painted over top of them because it's a painting, and you know, I don't want it to be exactly, you know, from the crowd kind of thing, because they are paintings. But like Tracy, I love to work large too. I think the largest I've worked maybe would be 72 by 96. I've done, you know, those two with, you know, large figures on them where you kind of feel like that crowd is confronting you as you're kind of, you know, coming up to that painting.
Wonderful. Yeah, they're interesting. Those little, again, in exploration is what they strike me as, those little 12 by 12s of yours, because they're very different from the other work in the show.
I think the reason that I like large paintings is that it's almost like an arm stretch either way for me. That it becomes sort of my size, that I'm you know, I'm mirroring my size onto a canvas.
Yes, I've heard that from other artists as well, actually, and I think it lends itself to so much more movement, like a whole body movement.
Yes.
Kind of, yeah. We have one question in the chat box here. Tracy, what are the colored objects on your shelf behind you?
Oh, for a period of 2 years, I think around, maybe 10 years ago, for a period of 2 years, every single color that I mixed, I recorded on a 5 by 5 canvas. I'll just get one of them.
Oh my gosh.
So here it is. So I covered the whole canvas. I did the edges as well. And then I recorded on the back of it what I mixed. And then at the end of those 2 years, it coincided with a show that I was doing. I actually, in a window space, I displayed all of my little canvases called the show Chronicle, because it was a chronicle of my colors. And I did it just to give sort of a testimony to the process of color mixing. I think there's so much in a studio, or so much that happens behind the scenes, that many people give no thought to, but color mixing, I tell you, is a very serious business, and it takes a lot of time and a lot of patience and a lot of thought. So when you're confronted with a block of color for every color that I mixed, I think it gives a clear testament to the process.
That's amazing.
So I keep them for inspiration, and I really would like to do it again, but it was time consuming. Every time you mix a color, paint a little canvas.
What an interesting idea. And it's fascinating to me because I've always found color mixing to be incredibly challenging. Like I said, I went to Waterloo, but I lean towards the ceramics, and I've always found painting very challenging, and in particular color mixing. So I'm in awe of both of you. If there's anyone that I've offered to write a question in the chat box, but we have a small crowd tonight. So if you would like to come off of mute and ask your question as well, I'd be happy to do that. Just write to me in the comment box there, and I'd be happy to do so. Sherry, when you were talking about kind of that process in your studio of you know, your day and how your day flows, this is going to be my last question, I think, and I'm going to ask it to both of you. But what are some of the things that you get your inspiration from? You mentioned podcasts or Tracy, you mentioned prayer and scripture and the forest. Could you just talk a little bit, each of you, about what's bringing you that inspiration and that joy right now? Sherry, you go ahead first.
Okay. I like to do a lot of reading of like articles. I love Canadian art. I love Border Crossings magazine. So that's kind of my go-to.
Mhm.
I might have an artist catalog that I hadn't looked at from a show for a long time, or I might have a book right now. I'm reading a Peter Doig book. Just it's kind of an interview style book about how he, puts a show together or creates a piece of work or that kind of thing. Sometimes I actually will try to recreate another artist's painting so that I can kind of really, because I kind of think about painting as a way to learn something, as a way to know something, a way to kind of, get at understanding it. And so I find if I can take a little painting and, just make it miniature size and not so much that I want to create a painting that looks just like somebody else's painting, but it's just a way to kind of understand how these paintings are made. Like I might think it's made a certain way and then I try something and it doesn't work and then I have to start over and that kind of thing. So I find those kind of things are really inspiring when I kind of discover something where something looks a certain way and it's actually kind of, done in a different way. Sometimes I just listen to some good music or I don't know, kind of depends on the day.
Yeah, it sounds like for the most part, other artwork and other artists are a big inspiration to you, just kind of visual creativity in general.
Yeah, for sure.
Tracy, how about for you? Your main inspirations?
I would say that my thoughts and what I see are an inspiration for me. Like I'm a faith-filled person and I believe in God, and this has a profound effect on my life and my practice as an artist. I'm just going to read it so that I have a statement here too. My work is influenced really by struggles and the imperfections of our lives and the pursuit of coming to a resolution or an acceptance. And I think that these are things that I think about all the time. Like life is not always easy. It's not always smooth. There's messy bits to our life. And I think that when I'm painting, I kind of work through those struggles and I try to come to a resolution by the end of my painting. My underpainting is part of that process. The underpainting tends to be a little bit, a little bit messy. And then as I paint, I leave little bits of the underpainting showing through. There's decisions made, what shows through, what is covered over, much like our lives and our past. It's an evolving process of like coming to terms with some things, burying some things, letting some of our past show through. I think that's basically really what inspires me when I paint. I think a lot. I think a lot about life, about people, about problems, and about coming to a resolution.
That is a beautiful analogy of life in art. And I think the creative process, it sounds like it brings so much to both of you in your lives, and it certainly for all of us and everyone who's come to see the show. There's been really great takeaways from it, and the work has been very impactful for everyone. I think for the end of this talk, I'm going to stand up and take the computer around. So if there's anyone in the crowd that hasn't been able to come in and see the show, they can see it that way. And then if either of you two have something to say about a painting that I'm showing, feel free to chime in, okay? So I'm just going to pin my screen. But I'm the main big screen here. And we will.
I think the viewers should take a look at Sherry's paintings and my paintings and see if they can find ways that they talk to each other.
Yes, I think that the kind of the conversation in this show is really beautiful, and it's interesting that the two of you weren't sharing images back and forth very much during the process, because the work speaks to each other really, really well. And I love the way that Al installed the show so that it kind of alternates between each of your paintings. So I'll just start walking around, and if either of you have a comment, please share. That was my initial station where I was gonna run the talk from, but there was too much sun coming in at the end of the day. This piece is a little bit different for you, Sherry, actually. It seems, or Tracy, sorry, it seems kind of different from the other ones.
Yes, there was two pieces in this show that were very different from the other ones. And as I said, my thoughts affect the way I paint. And for this particular painting, I was thinking about a very special person that had just passed. So I was grieving, and I was thinking about her, and I was painting. So that's why it's a little different, I think.
Yeah, has a different feel and a different composition to it. Like, I just love the way that they speak to each other and the way that the color picks up from one piece to the next. I don't have the best webcam, which is too bad because this is such a strong color show, but that's okay. And this is one that greets you as you come into the show at the front.
I named that one Carnelian based on the name of our show, A Matter of Color. Carnelian is a name of a jewel, a red jewel.
Oh, beautiful. Very jewel toned in those leaves there.
Yes.
It's nice how the red kind of, really sits on top of all the greens and the blues in that painting.
Yeah, it does. The leaves in that painting, Carnelian, you feel like you could touch them, like they're definitely in the foreground of the piece.
Yes, exactly.
And this one is called Citrine, of course, a yellow jewel.
And so that painting, Citrine, I know we've been talking a lot about color, but this is where kind of like the tonal values of color really are playing off each other, where you've got, the dark background. And then Tracy, you've got like that really nice kind of light yellowy green on top. And it just makes you feel like those leaves are almost three-dimensional and kind of coming right out of the painting.
They really did look that way in nature too, as if those yellow leaves were floating.
Oh, they're so pretty.
Well, you captured that for sure. I love the bicycle in this one, Sherry.
Those people are in Vancouver waiting for a bus.
And like, is he wearing a hat?
And I like how
he has a helmet on.
I like how the color just.
Yeah.
I like how the color is like a journey across the painting as well. Like little yellow on the left side, and then there's yellow in the middle, and then there's yellow on the right side.
This is the one I was looking at, Tracy, when you were talking about the way, the color dances and just changes a little bit across the canvas.
Yes.
Yeah, it's beautiful. This one is my personal favorite of yours, Tracy.
This is from Rondo Provincial Park.
There's a bit of a difference in the paint handling I find in this piece. I don't know, something to do with the edges of each area of color, and the red underpainting coming through is just gorgeous. See if I can get these two kind of in the frame together. This one is different for you, Sherry. It's got a background.
Sometimes I do put backgrounds in, but with this one, I kind of did a baseline where, the crowd is in the baseline, but not kind of above the halfway mark of the canvas. And so it was a little bit challenging kind of when I got all those figures in there. It's like, oh, what do we do at the top now?
Ah,
How do we not kind of overpower all those people? Because I really wanted to have a muted but a strong baseline. So I really enjoyed painting the plaid on that one guy's shirt in that
There's a
painting.
lot of detail in there.
Yeah, yeah, I really, that was probably one of the first things I did in that painting.
and it's as if the plaid in his shirt is somewhat mimicked with the shades in the background as well.
Mhm.
So it kind of brings you up. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Here we get into some of the smaller pieces. Some landscapes of Tracy's there on the right, or perhaps left. I think that the camera flips in Zoom from what I'm seeing and what you're seeing.
Left for us, yeah.
Yes. And then these, this piece here and this piece here, they're called Canadians 1 and Canadians 2.
Yes.
What are those titles mean to you?
I took those images in Ottawa. And so I just thought, you know, these are the Canadians. And it was,
They're very close-ups of fabric.
I love it.
they're 24 by 24 inches. So I'm just kind of taking, I still want the figures to be close to life size. So I'm just kind of taking a segment of, you know, what you see kind of in a 2-foot square.
This alcove is just great. We've got the crowds in the middle and flanked by 2 of Tracy's landscapes. I just think they work so beautifully together. It really is a great example of 2 artists' work who didn't know each other, and we brought together that it really worked so well, and there's such an interesting conversation to this show. Unfortunately, we're heading into another lockdown tomorrow, so we're going to be closed to walk-in traffic. But if anyone here has not had a chance to come and see the show in person, there is a video tour on our website that you can see, or on our YouTube channel, that has a little bit better approximation of the colors. And of course, if you visit our website, all these pieces can be found online.
Thanks, Danielle.
Oh, thank you. I'm gonna just kind of pull, see if I can pull you guys back up again here. I'm not sure how I did that. So many learning experiences running technological events. There we go. So that's the 3 of us here. Thank you both for your time tonight and for your work on this beautiful exhibition. We've been really happy to host it here at Westland Gallery, and we're very appreciative to both of you.
Well, thank you for having our work there together.
Thank you, everyone, and so have a good night.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.